The morning sun cast long shadows across the military base cafeteria as Elena Martinez wiped down the stainless steel counters for the third time. Her movements were precise and methodical, each gesture carrying the weight of years spent perfecting the art of invisibility. At 28, she had mastered the skill of blending into the background, of being present yet unnoticed, essential yet unremarkable. Elena had been working at Fort Davidson for nearly 2 years now, serving meals to soldiers, officers, and visiting dignitaries who passed through the base. The job paid well enough to support her younger brother's college tuition and her grandmother's medical bills back in San Antonio. More importantly, it allowed her to maintain the low profile she desperately needed. The cafeteria buzzed with its usual morning energy. Soldiers in crisp uniforms lined up for breakfast, their conversations a mixture of complaints about early morning drills and speculation about the day's activities. Elena moved between the serving stations with practiced efficiency, ladling scrambled eggs, arranging bacon strips, and ensuring the coffee urns remained full. She had learned to anticipate needs before they were voiced, to read the subtle cues that indicated when supplies were running low. "Morning, Elena," called out Sergeant Rodriguez, a regular who always requested extra toast. "Got any of that good salsa today?" Elena nodded with a small smile, reaching beneath the counter for a container of homemade salsa verde she prepared each morning. It was a small touch that had earned her a reputation among the enlisted personnel, though she was careful never to draw too much attention to herself. As the morning rush continued, Elena's thoughts drifted to the letter she had received the previous evening. Her brother Miguel had written about his upcoming graduation from engineering school, filled with excitement about job prospects and plans for the future. It reminded her of why she endured the long hours and demanding work. Every plate she served, every smile she offered, was an investment in her family's future. The familiar rhythm of her work was interrupted by an unusual commotion near the entrance. Elena glanced up to see a group of high-ranking officers entering the cafeteria, their presence immediately commanding attention from everyone in the room. At their center walked a man whose bearing and insignia marked him as someone of considerable importance. General Marcus Thornton was not a man who went unnoticed. Standing 6 feet tall with silver-streaked hair and piercing blue eyes, he carried himself with the confidence that came from 3 decades of military service. His uniform was immaculate, each ribbon and medal precisely positioned, telling the story of a distinguished career that had taken him from the muddy battlefields of overseas conflicts to the polished corridors of the Pentagon. Elena watched as the general and his entourage approached the serving area. She had served visiting officers before, but there was something about this man's presence that made her instinctively step back slightly, ensuring she remained in the shadows of her station. Her fingers unconsciously adjusted the long sleeves of her uniform shirt, a gesture so automatic she barely registered it. The general moved through the line with efficient purpose, selecting items with the decisiveness that had characterized his military career. Elena prepared his plate with extra care, arranging the food with the presentation skills she had learned from her grandmother, who had once cooked for wealthy families in Mexico before immigrating to Texas. As she handed the plate to General Thornton, their eyes met briefly. Elena offered the same polite, professional smile she gave to every customer, but something in the general's gaze made her pause. There was a sharpness there, an intensity that suggested a man accustomed to seeing details others might miss. "Thank you," the general said, his voice carrying the authority of command, even in this simple interaction. Elena nodded respectfully and moved to serve the next officer in line. But she could feel the general's eyes lingering on her for a moment longer than necessary. She focused intently on her work, determined not to give him any reason to remember her. The morning progressed without further incident. Elena continued her duties, serving breakfast to the steady stream of personnel who filtered through the cafeteria. She cleaned spills, refilled serving trays, and maintained the cheerful efficiency that had made her a reliable part of the base's daily operations. During her lunch break, Elena sat alone at a small table in the corner of the cafeteria, picking at a simple sandwich while reading a letter from her grandmother. The elderly woman wrote in careful Spanish, describing her garden and asking about Elena's well-being with the loving concern that had sustained Elena through the darkest periods of her life. As she folded the letter carefully and placed it back in her pocket, Elena noticed one of the kitchen supervisors approaching her table. Mrs. Henderson was a kind woman in her 50s who had taken Elena under her wing when she first arrived at the base. "Elena, dear," Mrs. Henderson said, settling into the chair across from her. "I wanted to let you know that we'll be having some special guests for dinner service tonight. Some important military officials are visiting, and they'll be dining in the officers' section." Elena nodded, understanding that this meant extra attention to detail and perfect presentation. "Of course, Mrs. Henderson. I'll make sure everything is ready." "I know you will, sweetie. You always do such beautiful work." Mrs. Henderson paused, studying Elena's face. "You've been looking tired lately. Are you getting enough rest?" The concern in the older woman's voice touched Elena deeply. "I'm fine, just staying up late helping my brother with some school paperwork. Thank you for asking." Mrs. Henderson reached across the table and patted Elena's hand gently. "You're a good girl, Elena. Your family is lucky to have you looking out for them." After lunch, Elena threw herself into preparations for the evening service. She arranged serving stations with meticulous care, ensuring that every utensil was polished and every serving dish was spotless. The officers' dining area required special attention, with cloth napkins instead of paper and ceramic plates rather than the standard melamine. As the afternoon wore on, Elena found herself thinking about the general's intense gaze from the morning. There had been something unsettling about the way he looked at her, as if he were trying to solve a puzzle. She pushed the thought aside, reminding herself that she was probably imagining things. Important men like General Thornton had far more pressing concerns than a cafeteria worker. The dinner service began at 6 o'clock sharp. Elena took her position at the main serving station, ready to handle the evening's special menu. The kitchen had prepared an impressive spread: herb-crusted chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, steamed vegetables, and fresh dinner rolls that filled the cafeteria with their warm aroma. The first wave of diners consisted mainly of enlisted personnel and junior officers, familiar faces who greeted Elena with friendly nods and casual conversation. She moved through the routine with practiced ease, her hands steady as she portioned meals and maintained the pleasant demeanor that was part of her professional armor. As the evening progressed, the atmosphere in the cafeteria became more formal. Senior officers began arriving for dinner, their presence transforming the casual dining environment into something more ceremonial. Elena noticed the increased attention to protocol, the sharper salutes, and the more careful attention to proper military bearing. Then General Thornton entered the dining area once again. This time, he was accompanied by fewer officers, but their collective presence seemed to command even more respect than the morning's larger group. Elena watched from her station as they took seats at a table near the windows, their conversation too quiet to overhear, but clearly focused on matters of importance. When the general approached the serving line, Elena was ready with her usual professional composure. She had served thousands of meals over the past 2 years, and she knew how to maintain the perfect balance of efficiency and courtesy that made her interactions memorable for all the right reasons. The general moved through the line methodically, making his selections with the same decisive manner Elena had observed that morning. When he reached her station, she prepared his plate with extra care, arranging the herb-crusted chicken and vegetables with the artistic touch that had become her signature. As she lifted the plate to hand it to him, Elena felt a sudden tightness in her sleeve. The fabric had caught on the edge of the warming tray, and as she moved to free it, the sleeve rode up slightly on her left forearm. For just a moment, a small portion of her tattoo became visible. The design was subtle, barely 3 inches long, rendered in black ink that had faded slightly with time. Most people wouldn't have noticed it, wouldn't have recognized its significance even if they had seen it clearly. But General Marcus Thornton was not most people. His eyes fixed on Elena's forearm with laser-like intensity. The plate he had been reaching for suddenly seemed forgotten as his gaze took in the intricate details of the partially visible tattoo. Elena quickly adjusted her sleeve, covering the design completely, but she knew it was too late. The general's face had gone completely rigid. His eyes, which had been professionally courteous moments before, now blazed with an emotion Elena couldn't immediately identify. Recognition mixed with something darker, something that made her blood run cold. The plate in General Thornton's hands began to shake almost imperceptibly. Elena watched in growing alarm as the trembling increased, the carefully arranged meal beginning to slide toward the edge of the ceramic surface. "Sir?" Elena said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your plate?" But the general seemed not to hear her. His eyes remained locked on her arm, even though the tattoo was no longer visible. The shaking in his hands intensified, and Elena realized with growing horror that he was losing his grip on the tray entirely. Time seemed to slow as she watched the plate slip from his fingers. The general, this pillar of military strength and composure, was coming undone before her eyes, and she was the only one close enough to witness his complete loss of control. The question that had haunted Elena for years suddenly took on new urgency. How long could she continue to run from a past that refused to stay buried? As the plate continued its inevitable fall toward the floor, Elena realized that her carefully constructed new life was about to shatter along with the ceramic, and there would be no putting the pieces back together again. The crash of ceramic against linoleum echoed through the officers' dining area like a gunshot. Conversation stopped mid-sentence as every head turned toward the serving station, where General Marcus Thornton stood frozen, staring down at the scattered remains of his dinner plate. Herb-crusted chicken and garlic mashed potatoes spread across the floor in an abstract pattern that seemed to mock the military precision that governed every other aspect of the base. Elena immediately dropped to her knees, gathering the broken pieces while apologizing profusely. "I'm so sorry, General. Let me clean this up right away. I'll get you a fresh plate immediately." But as she looked up at him from the floor, she saw that the general wasn't concerned about his spilled meal. His face had gone pale, his jaw clenched so tightly that a vein pulsed visibly at his temple. His eyes held a wild look that Elena had seen before in other faces, in other places, during a time she had spent years trying to forget. "Martinez," he said, his voice barely controlled. The single word carried the weight of recognition, of memories that neither of them wanted to revisit. Elena's hand stilled among the ceramic shards. How did he know her name? Her name tag only showed her first name, and she was certain they had never met before. Yet the way he spoke, the certainty in his voice, suggested otherwise. Colonel James Wright, one of the officers who had been dining with the general, approached with concern etched on his features. "Marcus, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." The general's laugh was sharp and bitter. "A ghost? Yes. That's exactly what I've seen." Elena rose slowly, clutching the broken pieces in her hands. Around them, the dining room buzzed with whispered conversations and curious glances. She needed to diffuse this situation before it drew more attention, before questions were asked that she couldn't answer. "Please, General," she said quietly. "Let me get you another plate. This was completely my fault." "Your fault?" General Thornton's voice rose slightly, causing several nearby diners to look over with increased interest. "No, Elena Martinez. This is most definitely not your fault." The use of her full name sent ice through Elena's veins. There was no way he should know her last name. No reason for a visiting general to have any knowledge of a cafeteria worker's identity. "Unless, I think we need to have a conversation," the general said, his voice now deadly quiet. "Privately." Elena's mind raced through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. She thought about the emergency cash she kept hidden in her apartment, the documents she had prepared for just such a moment, the escape route she had planned but prayed she would never need to use. "I don't understand, sir," she managed to say, though the words felt like lies in her mouth. General Thornton studied her face with the intensity of a man reading a battle map. "Conference room B, 15 minutes. Don't even think about running." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. He knew. Somehow, this man had recognized something in her tattoo, in her face, in some detail she had overlooked in her carefully constructed disguise. The life she had built, the safety she had found, was crumbling around her like the broken plate at her feet. Colonel Wright placed a hand on the general's arm. "Marcus, what's this about? You're causing quite a scene." "Cancel my appointments for the rest of the evening," General Thornton said without taking his eyes off Elena. "This is more important than anything else on my schedule." Henderson hurried over with a dustpan and broom, her face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry about this, General. Elena is usually very careful. I don't know what happened." "I do," the general said grimly. "Conference room B," he repeated to Elena. 15 minutes. As he walked away, Elena felt the curious stares of everyone in the dining room. She helped Mrs. Henderson clean up the mess while her mind worked frantically to process what had just occurred. 15 minutes wasn't enough time to disappear, but it might be enough to create a head start. Elena, honey, what was that about? Mrs. Henderson asked as they finished cleaning. I've never seen you so shaken up. I don't know, Elena lied. Maybe he's just having a bad day. But even as she said it, Elena knew that wasn't true. General Thornton's reaction had been too specific, too personal. He had recognized her tattoo, and that recognition had triggered something powerful enough to make a decorated military officer lose his composure in front of his peers. Elena excused herself and hurried to the employee restroom, where she splashed cold water on her face and stared at her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at her seemed like a stranger, someone who had been living a borrowed life, playing a role that was about to come to an abrupt end. She rolled up her sleeve and examined the tattoo that had caused such a dramatic reaction. The design was elegant in its simplicity. A small constellation of stars connected by thin lines, with a crescent moon at the center. To most people, it would appear to be nothing more than decorative body art. But Elena knew that to the right person, someone with the proper knowledge and experience, it told a very different story. The tattoo was a marker, a symbol that identified her as part of a group that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. A group that had been disbanded, its members scattered to the winds with new identities and strict instructions never to contact each other again. A group that had been involved in operations so classified that even acknowledging their existence could result in life imprisonment, or worse. Elena had received the tattoo 7 years ago, during what was supposed to be her final mission. She had been 21 years old, young and idealistic, convinced that she was serving her country in the most important way possible. The tattoo was meant to be a badge of honor, a permanent reminder of the sacrifices she and her teammates had made for the greater good. Instead, it had become a target painted on her skin. The mission had gone wrong in ways that still haunted her nightmares. People had died, good people, innocent people, and Elena had been forced to make choices that no 21-year-old should ever have to face. When it was over, when the bodies had been counted and the damage assessed, Elena and the other survivors had been given new identities and ordered to disappear. She had never expected anyone to recognize the tattoo. The program that created it had been so deeply buried that even most high-ranking military officials had no knowledge of its existence. But apparently, General Marcus Thornton was not most high-ranking military officials. Elena checked her watch. 10 minutes until the meeting. She could run, should run, but where would she go? She had built a life here, had people depending on her. Miguel was just months away from graduation, and her grandmother needed the money Elena sent home each month for her medications. More importantly, running would confirm the general's suspicions and put everyone she cared about at risk. If he really knew who she was, if he had access to her real file, then he would know about her family. Running would only make their situation worse. Elena made her decision. She would go to the meeting, would face whatever consequences awaited her, but she wouldn't go unprepared. She retrieved her cell phone from her locker and sent a carefully worded text message to a number she had hoped never to use. The message was simple. The stars are visible tonight. Anyone monitoring her communications would assume it was an innocent comment about the weather, but to the recipient, it was a code that meant Elena's cover had been blown and she needed immediate extraction. She didn't know if anyone was still monitoring that number after all these years, but it was her only insurance policy. If this meeting went badly, if General Thornton intended to have her arrested, or worse, at least someone would know what had happened to her. Elena walked through the base corridors toward Conference Room B with measured steps, her mind working through possible scenarios and responses. She passed soldiers and civilian workers going about their evening routines. People who knew her as the friendly cafeteria worker who made excellent salsa and always had a kind word for everyone. None of them knew that Elena Martinez was a carefully constructed fiction, that the woman they smiled at and chatted with had once been someone entirely different, someone who had done things that would shock and horrify the very people who considered her a friend. Conference Room B was located in the administrative wing of the base, a sterile space with white walls and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill.
Elena knocked on the door precisely 15 minutes after the general had issued his summons.
Come in. Elena entered to find General Thornton sitting alone at the conference table, his uniform jacket removed and his sleeves rolled up. He looked older than he had in the dining room. as if the weight of recognition had added years to his appearance. On the table before him lay a manila folder that Elena recognized with growing dread. "Please, sit down," the general said, gesturing to a chair across from him. Elena remained standing. "With respect, sir, I think there's been some misunderstanding. I'm just a cafeteria worker." General Thornton opened the folder and began reading from what Elena could see was a heavily redacted document. Elena Sofia Martinez, born San Antonio, Texas, March 15, 1997. Recruited at age 18 by a joint CIA Defense Department program codenamed Operation Nightingale, specialized in deep cover infiltration and intelligence gathering. Served with distinction on 4 classified missions before her team was compromised during Operation Blackbird in 2018. Elena's legs gave out and she sank into the chair across from him. "How do you have that file? That program was classified at the highest levels." "I should know," General Thornton said grimly. "I was the one who authorized it." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She stared at the man across from her, searching for any resemblance to the shadowy figure who had appeared in briefings 7 years ago, always referred to only as the General or Command Authority Alpha. That man had been a distant presence, someone whose orders filtered down through multiple layers of command, never seen clearly enough to be recognized later. But now, looking at General Thornton's face in the harsh fluorescent light, Elena began to see the similarities. The same cold blue eyes that had evaluated her during her final debriefing. The same precise way of speaking that had delivered her new identity and instructions for disappearance. "Operation Blackbird," Elena said quietly. "You were there. I was responsible for it," General Thornton corrected. "Every death, every casualty, every life destroyed by that mission was my fault, including yours." Elena felt the careful walls she had built around her memories begin to crumble. Operation Blackbird had been her final mission, the one that had ended her career as an intelligence operative and sent her into hiding. It was supposed to have been a simple extraction: get in, retrieve a high-value asset, get out. Instead, it had become a massacre that haunted her dreams and destroyed her faith in the righteousness of her cause. "Agent Martinez," General Thornton continued, using her old operational designation, "you and your team were betrayed. The enemy was waiting for you because someone in my command structure sold you out. 5 good people died that night because I failed to protect them." Elena closed her eyes, remembering faces that belonged to people who would never go home again. Sarah Chen, the team's communications specialist, who had dreamed of becoming a teacher after her service ended. Marcus Williams, their explosives expert, who had shown Elena pictures of his newborn daughter just hours before the mission began. David Rodriguez, their medic, who had saved Elena's life twice during previous operations. "I know their names," she said softly. "I know all their names." "So do I," General Thornton replied. "I've carried them with me every day for 7 years. Sarah, Marcus, David, Jennifer, Thomas. They were the best people I ever had the privilege to command, and I sent them to die because I trusted the wrong person." Elena opened her eyes and studied the general's face. She saw genuine pain there, the kind of guilt that carved lines in a person's features and left permanent shadows behind their eyes. This wasn't the cold, calculating commander she remembered from her briefings. This was a man haunted by the consequences of his decisions. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Why reveal yourself now?" General Thornton reached across the table and turned over a photograph that had been lying face down beside the folder. Elena gasped when she saw what it depicted. Herself, 7 years younger, standing with her team in full tactical gear just before the start of Operation Blackbird. They all looked so young, so confident, so certain that they were fighting the good fight. Because, the general said, "The man who betrayed your team is here, on this base, and I think he knows who you are." Elena stared at the photograph until the faces blurred together, her hands trembling as memories she had spent years suppressing came flooding back. The confident young woman in tactical gear seemed like a stranger now, someone from a different life entirely. But the faces of her fallen teammates were as clear as if she had seen them yesterday, their dreams and hopes cut short by someone's betrayal. "Who is he?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. General Thornton hesitated before answering. his fingers drumming against the conference table in a nervous rhythm that seemed completely at odds with his military bearing. "Colonel James Wright, my current second-in-command and the man I trusted most in the world 7 years ago." The name hit Elena like a physical blow. She remembered Colonel Wright from the dining room, the concerned officer who had approached when the general dropped his tray. He had seemed genuinely worried about his superior's welfare, displaying exactly the kind of loyalty and dedication that would make his betrayal all the more devastating. "You're certain it was him?" "I've spent 7 years investigating," General Thornton said, pulling additional documents from the folder, following money trails, analyzing communication patterns, cross-referencing intelligence leaks with personnel assignments. "It took me this long to gather enough evidence to be absolutely sure, but yes. James Wright sold your team to the enemy for $2 million and a guarantee of safe passage when his gambling debts became too large to hide." Elena studied the documents spread across the table. Bank records, communication logs, travel receipts. A paper trail that painted a picture of a man desperate enough to trade lives for money. The evidence was compelling, but it raised new questions about her current situation. "If you've known for years, why haven't you acted on it?" "Because I needed him to believe he was safe," General Thornton explained. "Wright is just one link in a larger chain. The people who bought your team's location are still out there, and they're still active. If I had moved against him too quickly, the rest of the network would have disappeared." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "I thought Operation Blackbird was about extracting an asset from a terrorist cell. That was the cover story," the general admitted. "The real mission was more complex. We had discovered evidence of a conspiracy involving high-ranking officials from multiple government agencies, people with access to the most classified programs, working together to sell intelligence to foreign powers. Your team was sent to retrieve documentation that would have exposed the entire network." The room seemed to spin around Elena as the implications became clear. "The mission failed because they knew we were coming. Which means the conspiracy is still active," General Thornton finished. "And they've been watching for any survivors who might pose a threat to their operation." Elena thought about her quiet life at the base, the careful routine she had established to avoid drawing attention. "How long have they known I was here?" "I'm not sure they did know until recently. But Wright recognized your tattoo tonight, just as I did. The difference is that he knows what it means in a way that most people wouldn't. He was present during the briefings when your team received those markings." Elena instinctively covered her left arm with her right hand, as if she could somehow hide the tattoo that had already betrayed her. "So what happens now? Do I run again?" "Running won't solve anything," General Thornton said firmly. "They'll find you eventually. And next time you might not have advance warning. Besides, I have a better idea." Elena studied the general's face, trying to read his intentions. There was something in his expression that reminded her of the strategic mind that had once planned complex military operations, the calculating intelligence that had made him one of the youngest generals in recent military history. "What kind of idea?" General Thornton leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspirative whisper. "We finish what your team started. We expose the conspiracy, bring down the network, and make sure that Sarah, Marcus, David, Jennifer, and Thomas didn't die for nothing." The proposal was both terrifying and appealing. Elena had spent 7 years running from her past, but the idea of finally confronting it, of seeking justice for her fallen friends, stirred something in her that she had thought was dead. "That's assuming Wright doesn't have me killed before morning," she pointed out. "He won't," General Thornton said with certainty. "At least not immediately. Wright doesn't know that I've identified him as the traitor. As far as he's concerned, I'm just a general who had an emotional reaction to seeing a ghost from his past. He'll want to assess the situation before taking any drastic action." Elena wasn't entirely convinced. "And if you're wrong, then we implement emergency protocols," the general said, sliding a small device across the table. "This is a secure communication device. If you sense any immediate danger, activate it and my security team will respond within minutes. But I don't think that will be necessary tonight." Elena picked up the device, a small black rectangle that looked like an ordinary cell phone, but felt heavier than it should. The weight of it in her hand was both reassuring and ominous, a tangible reminder of the dangerous game they were about to play. "What exactly are you proposing?" General Thornton opened another section of the folder, revealing surveillance photographs and detailed floor plans. Wright has been using his position to access classified information and pass it along to his contacts. We've identified several upcoming intelligence transfers, including one scheduled for tomorrow night. If we can catch him in the act and trace the delivery to its recipients, we can roll up the entire network. Elena studied the photographs, her trained eye automatically analyzing sight lines, security cameras, and potential escape routes. Despite 7 years away from fieldwork, the skills came back to her with startling clarity. "This is a military base," she observed. "Security is going to be tight, especially around classified areas. How do you expect to conduct surveillance without being noticed?" "That's where you come in," General Thornton said with a slight smile. "Elena Martinez, cafeteria worker, has access to areas that would be off-limits to most personnel. You can move around the base without drawing attention, and your work schedule gives you legitimate reasons to be in various locations at different times." The plan was elegant in its simplicity, but Elena could see numerous ways it could go wrong. What about backup? "If this goes sideways, I can't count on official support since we're operating outside normal channels." "You won't be alone," the general assured her. "I have a small team of people I trust absolutely. Individuals who weren't involved in the original operation and have no connection to Wright or his network. They'll be positioned to provide support if needed." Elena found herself considering the proposal seriously, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. The chance to finally bring justice to those responsible for her team's deaths was incredibly tempting, but she had learned through bitter experience that covert operations rarely went according to plan. "I need guarantees," she said finally. "If this operation fails, if Wright realizes what we're doing, I need assurance that my family will be protected. My brother, my grandmother, they can't be allowed to pay the price for my involvement." "Already arranged," General Thornton replied, producing another set of documents. "Your family will be provided with new identities and relocated to a secure location. They'll have everything they need to start fresh, regardless of what happens to us." Elena reviewed the relocation plans with professional thoroughness, noting the attention to detail that had gone into protecting her loved ones. It was clear that General Thornton had been planning this operation for some time, waiting for the right moment and the right opportunity to act. "There's, something else," the general continued. "The intelligence network we're targeting has been responsible for multiple security breaches over the past several years. American agents have died, operations have been compromised, and national security has been damaged. This isn't just about avenging your team. It's about stopping ongoing harm to innocent people." The weight of responsibility settled on Elena's shoulders like a familiar burden. She had joined the intelligence services out of a desire to protect people, to serve something larger than herself. That motivation hadn't disappeared during her years in hiding. It had simply been dormant, waiting for the right cause to reawaken it. "When do we start?" General Thornton smiled grimly. "Tomorrow morning when you report for your regular shift. Wright will be watching you, trying to determine what I know and what threat you represent. We'll give him something to see, but not what he's expecting." Elena spent the next 2 hours going over operational details, studying floor plans and memorizing schedules. It felt strange to be planning a mission again after so many years, but the familiar routine of preparation was oddly comforting. She had been good at this work once, before everything went wrong. As they prepared to leave the conference room, General Thornton handed Elena one final document. "Your real service record," he said quietly. "Unredacted, uncensored. Everything you accomplished before Operation Blackbird." Elena looked down at the file, seeing her younger self's achievements laid out in official language. Commendations for bravery, successful mission completions, recommendations for advancement, the record of a promising career cut short by betrayal and tragedy. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I need you to remember who you were," the general replied. "Not Elena Martinez, the cafeteria worker, but Agent Elena Martinez, one of the finest intelligence operatives I ever had the privilege to command. That woman is who we need tomorrow night." Elena closed the file and looked up at General Thornton, seeing in his eyes the same mixture of determination and fear that she felt in her own heart. They were about to embark on a mission that could either bring justice for past wrongs or result in both their deaths. "One more question," she said as they prepared to leave. "What made you recognize my tattoo so quickly? There were dozens of people in your command structure who knew about the markings." And General Thornton's expression grew somber. "Because I designed them myself. Every constellation, every star, every line. They were meant to honor the sacrifices your team was making, to create a permanent bond between people who were risking everything for their country. I never imagined they would become memorials for the dead." Elena touched her arm where the tattoo lay hidden beneath her sleeve, understanding now why the design had seemed so personal, so meaningful when she first received it. It wasn't just a mark of membership in an elite unit, it was a general's tribute to the people he was sending into harm's way. "Then we make sure their sacrifice wasn't meaningless," she said firmly. As Elena left the conference room and walked back through the base corridors, she felt the familiar weight of impending mission settling over her consciousness. Tomorrow night, Elena Martinez, the cafeteria worker, would disappear, and Agent Elena Martinez would emerge from 7 years of hiding to finish the job that had cost her teammates their lives. The quiet woman who served meals with a smile would show Colonel James Wright and his conspirators exactly what happened when you betrayed the wrong people. And this time, Elena would make certain that justice was finally served.